everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics, Big Baby and STARCRASHER at KINGCOMICS.CA. Today is Greg Capullo Day, guys. We're taking a look at X-Force issue number 20, cover dated March 1993. So pretty dynamic, action-packed cover here. We got Shatterstar rushing towards us. We got Cannonball punching out S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury. But what really makes it here is the layering, right? And sometimes as artists, we tend to have this natural aversion to cropping stuff out of the panel, but we don't realize that, you know, it's those crops that really make things more evocative and really open up the scene in a weird way, even though we're cropping stuff out. What do I mean by that? Well, these, you know, forget GW Bridge up here, Farrell, and the gun here. This would still be a pretty exciting cover. We've got a bit of overlap and layering with Sunspot in the background. But what really adds that extra little bit and brings the action towards us is those elements in the foreground that are cropped out. The gun here, again, GW Bridge and Farrell. Those elements there are what create that extra little bit of layering and bring the action to us. So the more you crop out elements like that, the more basically you're evoking a world that continues outside of the frame that we're seeing, in this instance, the frame being the cover here. So it's something that I had, you know, trouble with all throughout the years, and eventually kind of understood that, yeah, it just makes for better composition and illustration to have those elements cropped out of the frame and of the illustration that you're working on. So that's it for the cover. Let's have a look inside, see what's going on there. Starting off the pretty cool page, Capullo's done this before when he was doing work on Quasar, where he's not afraid to use a lot of the negative space of the page and just kind of throw panels on top of that, where it almost feels like they're floating in that negative space, and I really like that. Little things like having the satellite burst out of the panel here really help, again, with that layering effect and creating that sense of 3D, and I think it works really well here. And it's, again, no characters, but a very interesting page just because of the panels, you know, the diagonals and the different shapes and stuff. You know, you don't get one kind of standard panel here. It's all diagonals. Everything's kind of moving, shards of glass almost on that negative space. And you almost feel like those panels are floating in space in a weird way. Even the overlap of this panel here and that panel overlapping that one, all of this just adds to the layering and adds to that sense of 3D and space, right? So that works really well. Yeah, and I noticed when he uses Kirby Crackle, he's really, probably the inker really being tight with it and using circle templates to get those, because they are perfect circles, right? Not doing the kind of scratchier, more textured Eric Larson type Kirby Crackle, which I like both, right? Both work well. And then boom, we've got this amazing double page splash. Once again, no actual characters, but just this amazing piece of technology at a diagonal, very important to create that dynamic sense, even though not much is going on. We get a dirtier kind of version of the Kirby Crackle here, which is fun. Maybe helps to give it just a little bit more energy to the scene than if it was that tight circular template stuff that we saw the page before. And just drawing your attention down here with some, I don't know what you would call this, emphasis lines or something to the ship here that we're going to be kind of zooming into, and the dialogue all helps to kind of bring our focus here once we've laid our eyes on this amazing piece of technology here, which, if I'm not mistaken, turns out to be Cable's orbiting satellite. So we've got Fabian Nicieza and Greg Capullo, Harry Candelario, the inker from way back on Quasar, who I think is doing a stellar job here on Greg Capullo's really come into his own, and they've really formed kind of a really stellar art team at this point. Chris Eliopoulos is doing the lettering, and Steve Buccellato is the colorist. Back on Earth, they've realized there's a problem. The satellite, you know, up above the Earth here, they're asking, I forget her name, she's kind of, at this point in time, she's the leader of, I think her name is Val or Valerie, could be wrong on that, let me know in the comments, but she's basically the leader of X Factor, who at this point are kind of a mutant government associated team, right? And she says it's not really what, you know, they suspect Cable, even though at this point Cable's supposed to be dead, right? But it's really not her purview. She says it's more S.H.I.E.L.D. And I thought this transition was weird because we go from that to here, where, you know, now we're in a S.H.I.E.L.D. office, I guess, with Nick Fury. And, you know, he calls the person he's looking at, GW, so we can assume it's GW Bridge slamming his fist on the desk here. Love this close-up of the fist and the layering right up front, and then Nick Fury more in the middle ground background. I guess the smoke would be the background, he'd be the middle ground, and this would be the foreground. I think this whole panel works really well. I just think it should have been on the page turn and should have been the first panel on the next page. Just weird to have the transition from one scene to another between these two bottom panels, to me anyways. Then the sequence continues. I've talked before about characters not smoking comics anymore at some point in Marvel. You know, the three big ones I've talked about before: Wolverine, Nick Fury, and the Thing. If it made sense for anyone to smoke, it'd be through those three guys. Wolverine's got the healing factor. You know, Nick Fury's kind of got a version of the super soldier serum, so you can assume, you know, he heals from whatever damage the smoking might cause. And the Thing, well, again, probably... I assume he's got rock lungs or something. I don't know for sure how the physiognomy works there. But, you know, characters I think make sense to have smoking just story-wise or plot-wise, and not, again, to encourage smoking or discourage smoking or anything, but just to acknowledge that there are people out there who smoke. I like the body language right here in this panel here of GW Bridge kind of looming over, and, you know, Nick Fury pulling the cigar away and leaning on the desk. I just think Greg Capullo's always been a master at that type of storytelling. And then boom, we've got another transition here, the same panel basically, right? And you've got Nick Fury getting pissed off at James Rhodes now, who, if you know a little bit about Iron Man lore, is War Machine, right? So they're all kind of worried about the satellite and what's going on. GW Bridge obviously thinks that somehow Cable's responsible for that. And that's kind of the setup for the story for this issue. Everyone trying to get on board of that satellite and I guess find out if Cable's still alive or controlling it. GW Bridge definitely suspects it. I guess we'll find out as we go through the issue if that's what's going on there, possibly next issue. So now we're going to focus on X-Force a little bit like we saw in last issue. It's a new direction for them. They don't have their leader anymore, Cable. We've got new costumes that we'll see a little bit later, and I'll talk about those a little bit more. And here they are just kind of trying to reestablish some sort of communications arrays, what is described in the dialogue here. And again, just, you know, this could have been just a big cube with a few lines on it, but I really like the way Capullo adds those little bits to make, you know, some sort of futuristic kind of technological thing. Again, his version of what everyone copies, the Kirby tech from Jack Kirby, right? Everyone has their version of it. And we're definitely getting a really cool version of it here by Greg Capullo. This little touch of adding the screen tone on the bottom for the shading of it, I think works really well graphically. And I talk about Greg Capullo's mastery of body language, right? Just the movement of Shatterstar here is really great. The balance in the character. And, you know, we've got Farrell in the background here and here, you know, washing herself like a cat. We saw a little bit of that last issue. So I guess he figured, hey, that's kind of a cool touch. And he's using it here again. And I agree with him. It's just something we didn't get in the characterization with Rob Liefeld, right? Rob Liefeld has more of a kind of posy, stoic kind of thing going on when he's drawing his characters, where Capullo definitely feels a little more naturalistic and thinks a bit more and has the characters do things that are in line with, again, their character. And just works really well here. What I thought was funny too is, you know, we're getting Greg Capullo's interpretation of Shatterstar's hair once he's not wearing, you know, the whole accoutrements and the headgear that he had with the Rob Liefeld design. So it just kind of shows how ridiculous his hair is, where, you know, this part of his hair is almost like curly and permed possibly, and then the ponytail is wavy but pretty much straight. So just an odd kind of hairdo, I think, for Shatterstar, right? Just looks kind of funny. So to get them around, they've included Leela now as part of X-Force. I remember seeing her, I think, in the X-Men series by Jim Lee. I could be wrong on that, but now she's apparently a member of X-Force. Obviously very convenient for them getting around since she's a teleporter. So they find out basically that Graymalkin, the satellite here that was controlled by Cable, is just in the orbit of Earth. So they, of course, just like S.H.I.E.L.D., GW Bridge are going to be going to investigate because obviously of that Cable connection, right? So it's got to be Cable's orbital station is what they're talking about, Graymalkin. Here's a good instance, an example of characters running. I've talked about this before in the past. You'll see some Rob Liefeld images where he draws characters running and they're all kind of in the same pose. And, you know, the same arm is down while the other one is towards the back and they're running off the same leg. Here's where it's important to vary each character in kind of breaking down the movement of characters running, right? All of them, you know, right away, if you look at Richter and Cannonball, they're opposite, right? So Cannonball's, you know, kind of running forward on his left leg and Richter's on his right leg. Feral, more cat-like and animal-like in her running stance, right? All of these just, you know, are more in line already with the characters' personalities to a certain extent, their body language, and just within the panel makes for a lot more variety and a lot more dynamics when you've got multiple characters running like that. We get kind of a money shot of the new costume designs that we talked about last issue, right? Getting a good shot of at least Cannonball's new costume and a bit of Shatterstar's. I'm not sure. I think I still do prefer Shatterstar's original Rob Liefeld design. What I think happened here, this is probably editorially driven. Once the Image guys, you know, moved from Marvel to Image, Marvel editorial kind of pissed off at them, you know, and in any instance they can, you know, change up the team members and change up the costumes, they do that. So in X-Force, since there's not a huge kind of marketing toy line or cartoon or anything, they were more than free to kind of, you know, vary those designs, which they've done here, although they are still very 90s inspired and somewhat similar to Rob Liefeld's original designs with the pouches and kind of the 90s accoutrements here and there. But with something like X-Men, where Jim Lee had redesigned the characters, the animated X-Men cartoon was already, you know, being drawn up and designed, and they had used those designs, and Marvel really wanted to change them, but unfortunately it wouldn't have been cost effective. And that's one of the reasons why in the X-Men title, once Jim Lee left, the designs did, at least for a while, stay pretty much like the designs that Jim Lee had established. It was more of a practical thing rather than, you know, a personal thing, where with X-Force, I feel like, okay, well, we've got the opportunity to move away from what Rob Liefeld was doing as much as possible. Kind of petty, but there's a lot of that going on at Marvel after the Image guys left, right? So kind of a B story page here. Just, you know, again, using that negative space, we've got some pretty standard panels and then some diagonal and broken line panels to kind of create a bit of excitement, a bit of dynamism in a page where there really isn't that much, to be honest. Good silhouette here with just a few highlights that I think works really well. And then we get another, I guess, a C story, and we've got Domino kind of coming back into play here, and Grizzly, who really, I think at this point was only really introduced in, is it issue 8 of X-Force that Mike Mignola draws? That's his first appearance, I think. And then in the Cable miniseries 1 and 2. So haven't seen a lot of them since then. So clearly, you know, a bit of prologue to these characters being reintroduced into the main storyline. And just giving us a bit of a view here on these pages of what's going on with the other characters involved in the whole X-Force saga. We've got this character dying. I'm not quite sure why, and he kind of catches fire. Gideon is, you know, the goal of this page is to reintroduce Gideon into the storyline. And once again, like the page previous to this, we've got a pretty kind of straight up storytelling with, you know, rectangular panels. And then once there's a bit of action, things tilt. We got a broken panel, right, to heighten the tension and the dynamism in the pages. I think it works really well. And once again, just the depiction of the technology here and the shield shuttle flying in with these kind of, you know, speed lines, action lines. I think this panel works really well. Really interesting to just do kind of a quick overlap onto a background of space that we're getting back here. Once again, creating that 90s type layering that all those Image artists were doing. And Greg Capullo, I think, is one of the most successful at. This panel here, great for many reasons. The layering of it, right, just feels really kind of naturalistic. You know, if you look at like sci-fi movies and stuff like Aliens, it just kind of reminds me of that. The layering, you know, the technology in the foreground, these two guys in the middle background, and extra bit of background, all the technology in the ship and stuff looks great. And once again, Nick Fury smoking in the ship is hilarious to me. Because I would assume, you know, even though I like the character smoking on such an expensive piece of technology, I don't really think the government would allow smoking on there. But, you know, it's a comic book, and I'd love to see the characters smoke. This here kind of, in a weird way, reminds me of 2001 Space Odyssey, when he's trying to get back into the ship and Hal won't let him, right? Kind of reminiscent of that there. If you're into 2001, you know that movie. If you don't, check it out. It's great. It's classic. And it's nice to see, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D., just like the Army and the military and the Navy, right? Land, sea, and air, and even space, right? And they've got S.H.I.E.L.D. issued spacesuits here, which look pretty cool. Very 90s inspired as well. So X-Force have made their way, right? They've teleported onto Grey Mulligan. They're trying to find out more about maybe what happened to Cable, and a lot of dialogue, you know, not that much interesting stuff kind of going on in this page specifically, right? So it's a pretty calm conversational page. So everything's kind of straight up and, you know, not too much crazy layout and layering and stuff, but it all works well, easily readable, some interesting graphic stuff where the screen tone and the background here on the ship, I think works really well. And even this kind of weird, you know, screen tone just as a background, I think looks really cool actually. And I love this close up once again, kind of like the cover where you've got something in the extreme foreground, mostly cropped out, but we got like a quick silhouette with a bit of highlights on Farrell here. Really cool, distinctive, and really makes Farrell live up to her name, right? And she looks very Farrell in this shot here. So they realize that the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are there, and of course, it's a Marvel comic, it's a superhero comic, so they're going to be facing off and fighting each other there. And another dynamic panel of, you know, characters running, you know, very different from the one we saw before. Everyone's in a different position, standing on a different leg, and you've just got Cannonball. You know, we know that he can fly and go really fast, so he's even closer to us, bringing the action right up front to us. Used to love pouring through these pages here and see all the different comics that were coming out, right? There's a huge nostalgic value to these ads for entertainment this month. Love that stuff. So yeah, kind of a parallel here with the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, you know, having more of a conversational page, and then boom, you know, everything's straight and kind of, I guess, traditional mostly in the layout. And then we get a broken panel, a diagonal, some explosive action, right? And in come the X-Force members, right? And again, reading direction makes sense, right? At a diagonal here towards there. 2 vertical panels on 1 page. Looks really cool. Looks really cool. Handles multiple characters and layering properly. You know, everyone's, you know, you got the leg cropped out here, most of Cannonball cropped out. All that serves to, again, make the image more layered and 3-dimensional. And no background needed, of course, because you want to highlight the dynamism of the movement of them kind of coming towards S.H.I.E.L.D. at a diagonal. And then we just get a very action-packed sequence. This is kind of funny because, you know, Shatterstar almost in a Spider-Man-like position, right? I guess he's, you know, trying to tell us that Shatterstar is pretty athletic and pretty flexible. Love this shot of Farrell here too. There's just something about the extreme angle, you know, where you almost don't see, well, because she's got a beard, right? Basically, we don't really refer to that, but she's got facial hair and it covers up, you know, her jawline and stuff. But the way you just get the teeth here and the extreme down shot and what I would call a Kubrick stare for sure here. There's something about this shot of Farrell that I really like here, and I think it works really well. There's another shot of Shatterstar being quite the gymnast, right? Again, very flexible, Spider-Man-like. The impact of Cannonball here, punching Nick Fury, I think works really well. You know, the power emanation that he's doing here with Cannonball was kind of laid down by Rob Liefeld. I don't know if many artists before Rob were kind of doing that explosive kind of kinetic energy behind Cannonball, right around where his ass is usually. But there's something just much more dynamic and explosive about the way Capullo does it. With Rob Liefeld, it almost looked a bit more like smoke, where here it looks like an actual kind of explosion. And I did say it's around his ass, so, you know, maybe I don't want to make any obvious fart jokes, but there you go. There's Sunspot again, kind of powering down. We got a little bit here, right? The Kirby crackle all around, and then just the very, very template, clean-driven Kirby crackle here, which I think works well, again. And then boom, you know, we saw James Rhodes earlier in the issue, and we get another 90s kind of Rob Liefeld trope. McFarlane did it as well, where you got to turn the page, and the splash page is horizontal and not vertical. And I mean, just kind of a by-the-numbers shot of him, but just great kind of rendering all the way throughout. Great metallic texture, right? You get the sense, obviously, that he's made of metal. And he's kind of the 90s version of Iron Man, right? With all the extra guns and stuff. It's almost like if you crossed Cable and Iron Man, you would get War Machine. And promise next issue, Iron Man versus X-Force. Well, they call him Iron Man. So maybe at this point in Marvel continuity, he actually is Iron Man. I don't know for sure. But to me, yeah, definitely, I always remember this guy as War Machine. And I'll talk really quick about the coloring. Once again, I think the better quality newsprint with, the very kind of saturated colors on top works really well. And, even though they're not doing anything too fancy with they're not doing computer colors at this point yet, I don't think at Marvel. There's just something I really like about the contrast with the background and the main figure in the front, and something about the coloring here that I feel works really well. And it's not subdued, it's not over the top, it's just right. And that, I guess, is going to do it for my review of X-Force number 20, guys. So if you're still watching, guys, and you're still subscribed to the channel, thank you so much. I really do appreciate all your support. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second. Really helps the channel out, helps us grow, and it helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. Speed of comic books, I've got my own that I've created. They're called Big Baby, and another one-shot that I created called STARCRASHER. If you want to check those out, please go to KINGCOMICS.CA and order those, and hopefully you'll enjoy them. I sure enjoyed making them. Hopefully you enjoy reading them. So there you go, guys. That is it for today's review. Thanks again for watching, and have yourselves an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents STARCRASHER one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.